My name is Stephanie Gower. I work at Toronto Public Health, where we do research, policy, and advocacy for a healthier Toronto.
Would you be able to describe the last project that was concerning the D.V.P pollution? And maybe you can elaborate on what the project was, what it consisted of, and how it went.
Sure. So we did a project looking at air quality in the South Riverdale and Beaches area, and that includes the southernmost portion of the D.V.P. We're trying to get a handle on what air quality is like at a local level, so on a neighborhood scale. We had a list of 30 different air pollutants that we were interested in, and we wanted to know what the levels of those air pollutants are in the neighborhood. We wanted to know how they vary across the neighborhood. And we wanted to know where the air pollution was coming from. Because when you look at just one pollutant at a time, which is the way we do it for air quality standards, we compare concentration of a pollutant to a specific standard, and we say, is it above or below? And if it's above, then there's a concern. But the reality is, for each of us, we're actually exposed to a mix of substances all the time. When we go out there, we're not exposed to just one substance at a time. So we were trying to get a sense of what the cumulative health impact is for that community. The next group of substances we looked at were the carcinogens, chemicals that have been associated with development of cancer. And we found for those, there was a small increase in the lifetime risk of developing cancer associated with the levels of pollutants that are in that neighborhood, and with levels that we've seen when we've looked at the city as a whole. So there is a report from 2004 that's getting a bit older now, which predicts that air pollution contributes to 1,700 deaths and 6,000 hospitalizations across the city each year. So if we kind of look for this particular neighborhood at the numbers we had, they do line up. The third batch of air pollutants we looked at are called criteria air contaminants, and they are the ones that are most common in our airshed, and they're primarily associated with cardiovascular and respiratory health outcomes. Because the thing is, when we look at the air standards that we have in the province of Ontario, they are for one pollutant at a time. So you look at what's the concentration of that pollutant and you compare it to an air standard. But as people who live in the city, we're exposed to all of those pollutants at once. So we wanted to be able to try and find a way of looking at what's the cumulative health impact of being exposed to more than one pollutant at once. So we had our whole list of 30. And what we ended up doing is we kind of divided them into three groups of substances. So we had air pollutants that might be linked to cancer, so the carcinogens. We had air pollutants that were linked to non-cancer health outcomes, such as neurological, immunological, reproductive health outcomes. And then there's a final group, which are called the common air contaminants.
So which one had the most impact in regards to the toxins?
Actually, the pollutants that are associated with cardiovascular and respiratory health outcomes, which have the greatest impact on health. So what we found was that they increase the risk of premature death by about 10%. It's a level where we do want to do pollution prevention, and it's something that we need to keep working on. But we also have a new program called ChemTrack that's now fully phased in for the first time as of this year, and that's a program that collects data from small and medium-sized businesses about their use and release of air pollution. That means you take information about where pollutants are coming from, where they're being emitted from. So we had, for example, data about the number of cars and trucks on the different roads, and we can use that to figure out how much air pollution is coming out of cars and trucks. We had data about emissions from the big industrial facilities. They have to report to the federal government, so we took that data and used it to get a sense of how much pollution is coming out of those big industrial emitters. For things like homes and businesses, which use natural gas, we had natural gas usage, and when you burn natural gas, you also get air pollution. So that's how we got a handle on how much air pollution is coming from those sources. So we had all sorts of data about where the air pollution is coming from, and we also had data about where air pollution is coming from in the States and Ontario, because it's important to know that in Toronto, the air pollution that affects us here doesn't all just come from within Toronto. There's actually a significant portion that comes transboundary from the United States and Ontario. So once we have all of that data, that goes into a model, and it goes into a model along with a whole bunch of information about weather, because weather affects where the pollution goes after it's emitted. So you combine all that information, and what you end up with is a map that shows you what the concentrations are of each air pollutant across the neighborhood. We think that there still is more work to be done, and we're also in a position to advocate to, for example, the federal government on issues such as vehicle emission standards, which are not under our control, but they're mandated by the federal government.